Now, there's a narrative that Tampa Bay started off in a bad defensive look and switched to a better one, and that's why Kansas City slowed down. That's not true. There is a narrative that with Eric Fisher out, the Kansas City protection will break down, and this will slow down their scoring. That's not true. And from the bright mind of Louis Riddick, there's a narrative that if your defensive coordinator doesn't double Tyreek and double Kels, he should be fired. Well, Louis, I'd like to see you draw that up. We've talked about that. It takes a twist that Kansas City uses against Deshaun Watson and a twist that New England uses versus Kansas City pushed together to make it work. So I'd like to see you come up with that because I don't think you got it, and I don't think Todd Bowles has it either. So that narrative, too, is pretty broken because it opens up a lot of problems if you try that method in most circumstances. So the last time we saw Tampa Bay versus the Kansas City offense, we saw an avalanche right off the bat. Tyreek Hill absolutely killed them. They played some man coverage on him, and there's a narrative that this was a change that Tampa Bay went away from and that they figured it out as the game went along, and that just didn't happen. You saw a lot of things from Tampa Bay in that game. There was some man coverage early, didn't work. There was some 3-high with overhang safeties bailing, almost a cloud look. It didn't work. You saw cover 2, it didn't work. You saw 3-high with the corners on the boundaries bailing. That didn't work. There was really nothing Tampa Bay had that worked. It was 27 points for the Kansas City Chiefs early in the third quarter. They had already forced 2 field goals in the red zone and a turnover in the red zone. And when you take 3 red zone trips away from Kansas City and they only score 6 points, you've actually won the day. As the game went on, the only thing you really saw change was the percentages. There was more soft looks and less man looks. And this is good, but it didn't stop Kansas City. Kansas City rattled off 27 points very quickly into the third quarter. And from that point on, Kansas City hit a lull. Now, this wasn't Tampa Bay doing something that stopped them. This was Kansas City shooting themselves in the foot. There was a miscommunication with Watkins. There were a number of penalties on Kansas City that killed drives. And truly, Kansas City had gone into some stuff that was a little bit more vanilla and kind of let the game be because it was 27-10. When Tampa Bay got it to 27-24 late, again, the Kansas City defense also went into a lull. Kansas City got the ball back with 4 minutes to go with one objective, kill the clock. And that's exactly what they did. When you look at the Tampa Bay defense, you should look over at the Baltimore defense. And when Kansas City played Baltimore, it was embarrassing for Baltimore. They got spun in circles. They were confused. They were flying all over the place. They were trying to keep their integrity on their defensive coverages, and they just got split wide open. It was embarrassing. And Baltimore has a pretty good pass rush as well. It's the same thing you saw with Tampa Bay. They literally picked them apart, and they did whatever they wanted to do. The only time that the Tampa Bay defense had a prayer is when the game got condensed in the red zone. They have to force field goals. And that is all they can hope for in this game unless they come up with something incredibly exotic and incredibly creative. And that just isn't Bowles' MO. Bowles continues to do the things he does. He's going to give you man looks on third down and short, trying to get you knocked off the field, send pressures. He's going to play some zone to try and, stop the bleeding. But if you give Kansas City a soft zone, they pick you apart. If you play them up in man, they're going to get you down the field. Even in the game with Tampa Bay, there were a number of times where the coverage was right. And it didn't matter. Mahomes still saw coverage leverage, threw a ball, and said, my wide receiver is better than anybody in that region, and I'm going to put the ball in a place where nobody can get it but my wide receiver. Over and over, that's how the success was made. So if you're hoping for the Tampa Bay defense to make some gains here, you basically have to hope for Kansas City to shoot themselves in the foot and play a terribly inefficient game. They have to do to themselves because there's nothing Tampa Bay can truly do to stop what Kansas City does. You look at Baltimore, and yes, the Tampa Bay front has a little bit more pressure than them, but the coverage is significantly worse than what Baltimore can put on the field. That basically balances out the gain with the loss. And Kansas City's able to get the ball out very quickly and still attack you quite a bit down the field, still stretch your defense very fast. Too much speed on the field, and Tampa Bay is in a rough spot. Now, when you look at the Eric Fisher situation, yes, it's a downgrade, and that will not help Kansas City, but it won't hurt them as much as many people think, because if you look back on Kansas City back in the Alex Smith days, the Andy Reid and Childress MO was only bad things happen when your quarterback has the ball. They're going to get the ball out quick. And even if Tampa Bay pressures them right off the bat, they're still going to get the ball off quick. It's a numbers game, and it is to the disadvantage of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Also, if you look back in that Tampa Bay game, Devin White was a player that coming out of college we had our question marks on, even though he is an insane athlete. But much of the things that happened to Tremaine Edmonds last week happened to Devin White in the first game too. Now, Devin White is a much, much better player, but he still got put in a situation where he made false steps. He got his feet lying to him. He lost where he was in coverage, and they picked him apart. They circled him, they spun him around, and they did a number on him. Kansas City still has that ability to do that to just about any linebacker in the middle of the field, and it's going to happen to Devin White this week. But even with that heightened liability on the offensive line, this Kansas City offense can still work. You saw multiple times in the first game where Patrick Mahomes was operating 12, 13 yards behind the line of scrimmage to buy time, motions that moved him to get him extra time, and quick hitters that if you have overhang 3 high safeties, there are just open holes that he will take instantly. He won't even have the ball a second on some plays. I truly don't care who you have on the defensive line if the ball can get out successfully in under a second. There's nothing you can do. So if Bowles tries to do his aggressive play calling, he will get beat quickly. If he tries to do his conservative play calling, he will get beat a little bit slower. The Baltimore defense got spun in circles by this Kansas City offense, and Tampa Bay is about to get their own helping of it. That's really all this is. They break your tendencies so effortlessly. They get the ball out quick. They do a lot of damage in a lot of very efficient, easy ways. And there is no answer for Tampa Bay in this game. Well, there's one. There's one thing that we've seen work against Kansas City. So watch for this and see if Bowles can find it. You want a 3-man defensive line. You want to take Vita Vea off the field. Devin White is going to look or line up like a defensive tackle. He will often bail out of this. If the guard goes away from him, he will blitz. If the guard blocks him, he will bail. This will be a cloud coverage with 6 guys in coverage and 2 guys on lock coverage on Hill and on Kels. The only way you can make the numbers work in your favor with this double that Louis Riddick wants on Kels and Hill is if you only rush 3. And it's going to take a special thought in Bowles' head to see an offensive line as weak as Kansas City's and say, yeah, I'm going to rush 3 guys. 5 versus 3, let's do it that way, because that's the only way we can cover them. To put it simply, it's inevitable. You're going to need, for Tampa Bay to win, Brady to have one of the best games of his entire career, and Mahomes and the Chiefs to play an incredibly sloppy game. Otherwise, it's done. This puts us in a comfortable position this week. We get to bet on the most dangerous quarterback and the best coaching staff. And that's all it is. If you're betting on this one, look for the best line you can get and understand that this is about the worst matchup Tampa Bay can see and about as good as it gets for Kansas City. I love you guys. We need you. Stay strong, and I'll see you on the other side.